oracle of Delphi, where the journey of self-knowledge begins. High upon the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where clouds weave silver veils upon the rugged cliffs, stands the ancient temple of Apollo Delphi, the navel of the world. Pilgrims from distant lands once crossed mountains and seas to kneel before the altar of the god of light and prophecy. Kings came seeking victory, warriors sought omens, merchants desired fortune, and wanderers longed for meaning. Yet before they stepped upon the polished stone floor, their gaze would always meet the words carved into eternal marble. Gamaniu theta iota, sigma epsilon, alpha upsilon, tawoniu, know thyself. It was not an invitation. It was a warning. For those who entered seeking divine counsel had to face a far greater mystery, the labyrinth within. Why would Apollo, the god of light, truth, and music, command mortals to know themselves? Was it a gift of wisdom or a challenge meant to humble human pride? In an age when men believed the world was ruled by capricious deities, Delphi whispered a different truth. Before understanding the cosmos, one must first understand the soul. To know oneself is to face three eternal questions. What am I? Why do I live? How shall I live? Those who dare not ask these questions wander the earth like leaves in the wind, carried by desire, fear, victory, and despair alike. But those who are willing to turn inward discover that the gods help only those who dare to confront themselves. An ancient tale speaks of a young man who once journeyed to Delphi. Clad in dusty robes, his eyes burned with restless longing. He knelt before the oracle and asked, "Great Pythia, voice of Apollo, tell me the path to wisdom." The oracle, shrouded in smoke and incense, replied softly, "First, know thyself. For without knowledge of the self, no wisdom shall enter your soul." The young man was confused and protested, "But I came to seek the will of the gods. I wish to know my destiny, not my nature." The oracle smiled faintly and whispered, "Until you know who you are, no god can guide you, for the blind cannot follow the stars." To know oneself is the greatest of journeys, yet also the most perilous. Within each man lies a labyrinth vaster than any built by mortal hands, a realm of unspoken desires, forgotten memories, silent wounds, and hidden dreams. Most flee from this labyrinth. They fill their lives with noise, distractions, and ceaseless motion, terrified of the quiet voice calling them inward. But the brave, the true seekers, descend into the silence. They dare to confront their pride, their fears, and their shadow. They endure the trial of self-reflection, where illusions dissolve and false identities crumble. In the deepest chamber of the soul, one finally beholds the naked truth. I am neither the mask I wear, nor the names the world has given me. And in this recognition begins the first breath of freedom. Centuries later, Socrates would embody the wisdom of Delphi, living as though the inscription were carved into his very heart. When asked about his knowledge, he famously declared, "I know that I know nothing." For him, self-knowledge was not possession but pursuit, not certainty but questioning. Socrates wandered the streets of Athens, speaking with merchants, poets, and generals about justice, love, courage, and the good life. Through relentless inquiry, he shattered their illusions and his own. He believed that a life unexamined is no life at all. And so, when the hemlock cup was brought before him, he drank without fear, for he had faced the deepest question of all. Who am I, and how should I live? To know oneself is also to confront mortality. The ancients feared hubris, the arrogance of forgetting one's limits and believing oneself equal to the gods. Delphi reminds us, we are neither divine nor insignificant. We are fragments of eternity carried within fragile flesh. To deny this is folly. To accept it is wisdom. Self-knowledge means understanding both our power and our limits. To act bravely, yet humbly. To seek truth, yet embrace mystery. To love life, yet make peace with death. Even now, the stones of Delphi are silent, and the oracle's voice has faded into history. But the inscription remains carved, not in marble, but in the marrow of humanity. Know thyself. For in every age, the greatest battles are not fought with swords or empires, but within the silent chambers of the heart. He who conquers the self walks free, even when chains bind his body. He who remains a stranger to himself wanders eternally, though he crosses 1,000 worlds. The Oracle of Delphi offers no prophecy, no divine decree, only a mirror. It does not speak of future kings nor fallen empires, but of the eternal journey that begins and ends within you. Step before the marble gates of your own soul and listen. The voice carved in silence still whispers, know thyself. Beneath the colonnades of the Athenian agora, where sunlight spilled upon marble and the hum of merchants filled the air, Socrates walked slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed not upon the world, but inward. Around him followed 3 of his young disciples, Glaucon, Crito, and Xenophon, each eager, restless, and burdened with questions. They came seeking wisdom, yet Socrates offered none freely. Instead, he gave them a mirror, one polished not by silver but by thought itself. Glaucon, impatient as ever, spoke first. Master, you tell us always to know ourselves, yet I feel I know who I am. I am Glaucon, son of Ariston, of noble birth, praised by many. Is this not self-knowledge? Socrates turned to him with a faint smile, the kind that unsettled even the proud. Tell me, Glaucon, he said gently, when you say you are Glaucon, what do you mean? Are you your name given by another? Are you your birth, which you did not choose? Are you the praise of men, which can vanish in a single whisper? If I take away these things, what remains of Glaucon? Glaucon hesitated, words caught in his throat. I suppose I am my thoughts, my desires, my choices. Ah, Socrates said, but are your desires truly your own? Or are they woven by the hands of the city, by the voices of poets, by the shadows of your fears? Tell me, Glaucon, if I command you to desire nothing, can you obey? If you cannot, then perhaps you are less master of yourself than you believe. Crito, troubled, stepped forward. Then are we slaves, Socrates? Are we bound by chains we cannot see? Socrates looked to the horizon, where the sun touched the edge of the Acropolis. Yes, Crito. Most men live as prisoners within a silent cave. They see not the truth, but the shadows cast upon the wall, and they name these shadows reality. They cling to them, defend them, even die for them. But the light lies behind them, unseen, because to turn and face it requires courage, the courage to question everything one believes. Xenophon frowned. But Master, if all that we know are shadows, then how shall we know what is real? Socrates placed a hand upon his shoulder and spoke softly. Begin not with the heavens nor the laws of gods, but with the soul within you. Examine each thought as a sculptor examines marble, carving away what is false, refining what is true. When you hear a voice within that says, "I am this," or "I desire that," ask it, why? Ask until silence remains. In that silence, you shall glimpse yourself. Glaucon, still restless, said, "But Master, why does it matter to know myself? I wish for honor, wealth, and influence. What use is this endless questioning if it does not bring me power?" Socrates laughed softly, like wind rustling through olive leaves. Because Glaucon, a man who does not know himself, is like a ship without a rudder. He may sail swiftly, yet he knows not where he goes. You seek wealth, yet wealth without wisdom enslaves. You seek honor, yet honor without virtue corrupts. You seek influence, yet influence without self-mastery destroys both the man and the city. He paused, letting his words settle into their hearts like seeds awaiting rain. Then he spoke again, quieter yet deeper. He who conquers others is called strong, but he who conquers himself is free. End quote. At these words, a silence fell among the disciples. The marketplace noise faded. The shouts of merchants and clatter of sandals dissolved, and it seemed as though time itself held its breath. Glaucon lowered his gaze. His pride softened into contemplation. Crito's restless hand stilled. Xenophon's eyes, once clouded, began to clear. Socrates then knelt, tracing a line upon the dusty ground with his finger. Imagine, my friends, that life is like this circle. Most men walk its outer rim, chasing pleasures and fleeing pains, forever turning and returning. Yet the wise man walks inward, toward the center, where the soul rests in harmony. To know oneself is to walk toward this center. Few dare it, for the path demands stripping away illusion after illusion, until nothing remains but the truth. And the truth, my friends, is both terrifying and liberating. Glaucon asked softly, "And when we reach this center, Master, what shall we find there?" Socrates smiled faintly, his eyes glimmering beneath the fading light. "You shall find," he said, "that the one you were seeking has been seeking you all along." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the shadows of the agora stretched long and thin, as though Athens itself bowed before the quiet weight of the words. The disciples walked beside Socrates, silent now, their hearts burdened yet strangely light, for something had been awakened, not an answer, but a longing. That night, as the stars scattered across the dark veil of the heavens, Glaucon could not sleep. The words of Delphi echoed in his mind, soft as breath, sharp as flame. Know thyself. He understood now why the oracle spoke no prophecy, for the greatest oracle lies within. It is not the gods who must be questioned, it is the self. And thus, the journey had only begun. The mirror of the soul, on the silent witness within. The night hung heavy over Athens, a velvet shroud stitched with silver stars, and the agora lay in quiet slumber. Socrates walked slowly beneath the shadow of the Acropolis, his disciples following at a respectful distance. They came upon a small olive grove, where cicadas sang faintly in the stillness, and Socrates stopped at the base of an ancient tree. There, in the silence, he turned to his students and said softly, "Tonight, we shall seek not words, but truth. Sit and listen, not to me, but to yourselves." They gathered in a circle beneath the olive branches, the cool earth beneath their palms, the night breeze brushing against their faces. For a time, no one spoke. The city was quiet, save for the distant murmur of waves against Piraeus and the soft rustle of leaves. At last, Socrates closed his eyes and said, "Within each of you there is a mirror. It reflects all that you are, yet few dare to look upon it. For this mirror shows not the face you present to the world, but the soul beneath the mask. Tell me, Glaucon, when you speak to others, do you speak as yourself, or as the one you wish them to see?" Glaucon hesitated, shifting uneasily. I suppose I try to be what they expect of me," he admitted. Socrates nodded gently. "And thus, Glaucon, you are twice removed from yourself, once by the expectations of others, and again by your effort to fulfill them. You live in the image of a shadow, not the essence of being." Crito, restless, leaned forward. "But master, how can we know which is the mask and which is the true self?" Socrates opened his eyes and looked at him, his gaze deep as still water. "The mask fears silence, Crito. The true self welcomes it. When you sit alone, stripped of titles, possessions, and praise, ask yourself this: who remains when there is nothing left to defend?" A hush fell upon them, and for a moment, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Socrates reached down, lifting a handful of soil, letting it slip slowly between his fingers. "This earth returns to the earth," he murmured. "So too do our bodies fade, our names dissolve, our glories vanish into dust. Yet there is something within that observes the silent witness. Find this witness, and you shall find the one who neither rises nor falls, who neither gains nor loses, who neither begins nor ends." Xenophon whispered, almost to himself, "But master, if there is such a witness within, why do we not feel it?" Socrates smiled faintly, as though hearing the question from the depths of eternity. "Because, Xenophon, you mistake the noise for the witness. The thoughts that race within your mind are not you. They are like birds flying across the sky. The sky remains untouched, unbroken, eternal. The witness is the sky. The thoughts, the fears, the desires, they are but passing shadows." Glaucon leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "And if I find this witness, Socrates, what then?" Socrates closed his eyes again, his voice soft but resonant. "Then, Glaucon, you shall be free. For no man who knows himself can be enslaved by the praise or scorn of others. He walks neither in pride nor in shame, but in truth. And when misfortune comes, he suffers it without despair, for he knows that pain touches only the body, never the essence. And when death comes, he greets it without fear, for he knows that what dies was never truly him." For a long while, they sat in silence, letting the words sink into the quiet earth beneath them. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called from the shadows, its voice soft and haunting. Crito spoke again, his voice trembling slightly. "But master, if we are not our thoughts, not our desires, not even our names, then who are we?" Socrates opened his eyes and gazed at the moonlit horizon. "You are the one who watches. You are the one who knows. You are the eternal witness behind the passing tide of life. As the river flows, you are not the water, but the bed upon which it moves." He paused, drawing a simple circle in the dirt with his finger. "Most men mistake the ripples for the river itself. They chase after fleeting pleasures, fleeting honors, fleeting fears, believing these shadows to be the substance of life. But the wise turn inward and discover that beneath the changing surface lies something unmoving, unbroken, eternal. To know this is to awaken from the dream. Xenophon frowned, his young face shadowed by doubt. But why, Master, does the world not teach this? Why does the city not speak of the witness within? Socrates looked at him tenderly, with something between sorrow and love. Because, Xenophon, a city thrives on roles and masks. Men are praised not for who they are, but for what they appear to be. To know yourself is to step outside the game, and the world fears those who cannot be controlled. The students fell silent, each lost in the weight of his own reflection. The stars wheeled slowly above them, silent as ancient gods. At last, Socrates spoke once more, his voice no louder than a breath. Do not seek the oracle of Delphi, my friends. Seek the oracle within. No priestess, no temple, no god can speak more clearly than the silent witness of your own soul. The night deepened, yet none wished to leave. For within the silence of that olive grove, beneath the indifferent stars, something vast and wordless stirred the first glimpse of themselves, stripped of names, stripped of masks, bare and eternal. And in that stillness, each of them understood, though none dared to speak it aloud. The journey is not toward the gods, nor toward wisdom, nor even toward freedom. The journey is toward the self, the chains of desire, on the tyranny of want, and the path to liberation. The first light of dawn crept softly across the marble stones of Athens, touching the Acropolis with hues of pale gold. The city stirred slowly. Merchants opened their stalls, fishermen hauled their nets, and the distant bells of the smithies echoed through the waking streets. Yet Socrates sat in silence beneath an old fig tree. His disciples gathered around him. His eyes, half closed, seemed to gaze not upon the city but into some distant horizon of the soul. Tell me, my friends, he began, his voice slow and unhurried. What is it that men seek above all else? Glaucon, still eager to impress, answered first. They seek happiness, master, to live without sorrow, to have their desires fulfilled. One, Socrates inclined his head slightly. And do they find it, Glaucon? The young man faltered. Perhaps, sometimes. Socrates smiled faintly. And yet, I have walked these streets for many years and seen men chase after wealth, honor, beauty, and power, yet none are at rest. Like thirsty wanderers upon a salt shore, they drink endlessly, and yet their thirst deepens. Tell me, Crito, why do you think this is so? Crito thought for a moment, his brows knitted in quiet effort. Perhaps, master, because men desire too much? No, Socrates said gently, not too much, but unwisely. Desire itself is not the enemy. It is the master we serve without question. When the bowman does not know his target, no arrow can ever find its mark. Likewise, when a man does not know his true nature, he fires his desires into the void, forever missing the aim of life. He picked up a small pebble from the ground and held it between his fingers. Consider this pebble, he said softly. It asks nothing of the world, yet the river carries it where it must go. Man, however, rebels against the current. He wants the world to shape itself to his longing, yet he himself does not know what he longs for, and thus he suffers. Xenophon spoke up hesitantly. But master, is it wrong to desire? Should we cast away all longing, all passion, all dreams? Socrates turned his gaze upon him, his expression neither stern nor soft, but profoundly still. No, Xenophon. To live without desire is to live without fire, and a cold soul cannot give light to the world. But to be enslaved by desire, that is the chain from which we must free ourselves. It's on, Glaucon frowned. And how does one break this chain, Socrates? For when I desire wealth or honor or the love of another, it feels as though the wanting burns in my very blood. Socrates leaned forward, drawing 3 lines in the dust before him. There are 3 kinds of desire, Glaucon. The first is born of the body hunger, thirst, the yearning for warmth and rest. These are natural, and when fulfilled in measure, they bring harmony. The second is born of the mind, the longing for knowledge, beauty, and meaning. These elevate us, for they guide the soul toward growth. But the third, he paused, letting his words hang like a weight in the air. The third is born of ignorance, the desire for what others possess, the hunger for endless more, the craving to escape one's own emptiness. This, my friends, is the chain that binds men in suffering. He looked at Glaucon, his voice softening. When you chase honor to please the crowd, you become their slave. When you hoard wealth to silence your fear, you serve the fear itself. When you seek love not to give, but to possess, you entangle yourself in an illusion. In all these, you believe you are free, yet you walk in invisible chains. Crito's voice trembled as he asked, "Then are we doomed, master, to forever wrestle with these desires?" Socrates shook his head slowly. "No, Crito. The chains exist not to destroy you, but to awaken you. Every longing is a teacher, every craving a question, every wound an invitation to turn inward. The fool runs endlessly from desire to desire, believing the next victory will bring peace. The wise pause and ask, why do I seek this? What am I trying to fill? Who is the I that hungers? In this questioning, the chain begins to loosen and to wait. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the stillness of the grove envelop them. The morning sun warmed the stones beneath their feet. Birds called softly from the fig branches above. Then Socrates spoke again, lower, deeper. Freedom, my friends, is not to have nothing, nor to want nothing, but to no longer be possessed by what you want, to hold the world lightly, to walk upon it without clinging. This is the art of the free man," Xenophon whispered, almost in awe. "And if we learn this art, what then?" Socrates smiled faintly, as though hearing a truth older than himself. "Then, Xenophon, you shall become as still as the sea before dawn, yet as alive as the rising sun. You shall find joy not in what comes and goes, but in the one who watches it all, the silent witness within. And when you no longer serve your desires, you will find that life itself begins to serve you." For a long time, none spoke. The disciples sat beneath the fig tree, their hearts quieted, their thoughts turning inward like rivers seeking their source. Somewhere beyond the walls of Athens, the sea stretched vast and endless, its tides rising and falling, yet the deep waters remained unmoved. Socrates looked upon his students, and for the briefest moment, his gaze carried something infinite, as though he saw not who they were, but who they might become, should they dare to break their chains. At last, he rose, brushing the dust from his hands. "Come," he said simply, "let us walk." And they followed him into the waking streets, their footsteps soft upon the stones, each carrying within him the weight of a new knowing. The greatest battle is not against the world, nor the gods, nor even death itself, but against the tyranny of one's own desires. And far above them, as if in quiet approval, the morning sun crowned the city with gold. The silent war within, on the battle between the mind, the desires, and the self. Night fell upon Athens like a velvet shroud, deep and endless, pierced by 1,000 silent stars. The city, once loud with merchants and poets, now lay hushed beneath the watchful gaze of the Acropolis. In a quiet courtyard lit by an oil lamp, Socrates sat cross-legged upon the cool stone floor. Around him, his disciples gathered: Glaucon, Crito, Xenophon, and a few others whose names history has long since forgotten. The air was heavy with stillness, yet within each man's heart a storm brewed unseen. Socrates spoke softly, but his words carried like ripples across a silent pond. Listen carefully, my friends. The greatest war is not fought upon battlefields, nor between kings, nor even between gods. The greatest war rages within the heart of every man, a war without banners, without armies, without end. Glaucon leaned forward, restless as always. A war, master? Against whom do we fight? Socrates looked into his eyes, and for a moment his gaze seemed to pierce beyond flesh into the very soul. Against yourself, Glaucon. Against the tyrant of desire. Against the whispers of fear. Against the illusions of pride. It is a war waged in silence, where the battlefield is your mind, and the victor claims not the world, but freedom. Crito frowned deeply. But how can one fight himself, Socrates? Does that not mean we are divided, torn in two? Socrates smiled faintly. Indeed, Crito, man is not one, but many. Within you dwell three forces, each pulling in its own direction. The first is the body, craving pleasure, safety, and survival. The second is the mind, seeking order, meaning, and understanding. And the third, he paused, letting his words sink into the heavy air. The third is the witness, the silent self beyond both body and mind, eternal and unchanging. He drew 3 concentric circles in the dust before him. The outer circle is the body, loud, restless, full of hunger and longing. The middle circle is the mind, quick, clever, always weaving stories about the world and about itself. And at the center lies the smallest circle, yet it contains all others: the soul, the silent witness, the one who observes but is never touched. Xenophon whispered, almost to himself, "But master, if there is such a witness within, why do we feel so far from it?" "Because," Socrates said gently, "we have mistaken the noise for ourselves. We think we are the voice that cries, 'I want,' or 'I fear.' But these are only echoes, not the speaker. The witness remains silent, unbroken, eternal. To remember this is to begin the long journey home." Glaucon's voice trembled as he asked, "And if the soul is eternal, master, why does the body suffer? Why does the mind falter? Why do we feel this endless conflict?" Socrates turned his gaze upward, toward the constellations wheeling above them. "Because, Glaucon, harmony is not given, it must be forged. The gods did not place man into the world, complete but unfinished. We are apprentices of the self, sculptors of our own being. And as with all sculpture, the stone resists the chisel. This resistance is the war you feel, the body pulling one way, the mind another, the soul calling you deeper still." Crito spoke then, his voice tight with unease. "But master, why do so many fail? Why do men surrender to desire, to anger, to fear. Socrates' face softened, touched by a quiet sorrow. Because, Crito, it is easier to serve a tyrant than to face one's own freedom. Freedom demands responsibility to know oneself, to master oneself, to act not from impulse but from wisdom. Most men would rather be bound than bear the weight of such knowing, and so they wage their lives in chains they cannot see. He let the silence stretch, and in that stillness, the distant hoot of an owl echoed across the courtyard, solemn as an omen. Then Socrates rose to his feet and began pacing slowly, his steps measured as his thoughts. Do you know why the inscription at Delphi commands us to know ourselves? It is because without this knowledge, the war within is lost before it begins. The man who does not know his enemy cannot hope to overcome him, and in this war, your enemy wears your own face. Glaucon swallowed hard, his pride slowly unraveling under the weight of the words. Then how, master, he asked softly, does one win such a war? Socrates stopped, turned, and looked at them each in turn. His voice, when he spoke, was like water cutting through stone, patient, unyielding, eternal. You do not win, Glaucon. You awaken. Victory is not conquest, but clarity. The war ends not when you crush desire, but when desire no longer commands you. It ends not when fear disappears, but when you see it for what it is, a shadow upon the wall. You master the mind, not by silencing its thoughts, but by ceasing to mistake them for the self. He lowered his voice, almost to a whisper. Remember this. The one who fights himself forever remains divided, but the one who knows himself becomes whole. Xenophon closed his eyes, as though tasting the words rather than hearing them. A hush fell upon the disciples, and for a time none dared speak. Above them, the stars wheeled silently, and the cool night wind carried the faint scent of wild thyme. In that quiet, Socrates' voice rose once more, softer now, yet reaching deeper than before. There will come a day when each of you stands alone, he said. No teacher, no city, no gods to guide you. You will face temptation, sorrow, and loss. You will stand at the crossroads, where one path leads to desire, another to fear, and a third into the unknown silence of the soul. When that day comes, remember this: the voice that demands, the voice that trembles, and the voice that doubts. None of these are you. You are the one who listens. Crito looked up, his eyes wide and wet in the lamplight. And if we fail, master? Socrates smiled, and in that smile was neither judgment nor pity, but a strange and endless compassion. Then begin again, he said simply, for the war within is eternal, but so too is the chance to awaken. The lamp guttered in the soft wind, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The disciples sat unmoving, each swallowed in his own silence, as though something vast had opened within them, not an answer, but an endless question. And above them, indifferent yet eternal, the stars kept their ancient watch. The city of masks, on identity, roles, and the illusion of the self. Dawn broke gently over Athens, spilling pale gold upon the marble columns and terracotta roofs. The city stirred like a living being. Its streets breathed, its markets hummed, its temples whispered silent prayers to forgotten gods. And yet, beneath the surface of this waking world, an invisible drama unfolded, a theater of endless roles and shifting faces. where each man and woman became both actor and audience, prisoner and playwright. Socrates walked slowly through the agora that morning, his steps unhurried, his gaze roaming as though he were seeking something that could not be seen. Around him, life unfolded in its infinite disguises. Merchants shouting prices as though their words could bend fate. Orators proclaiming their visions of justice, hungering not for truth but for applause. Soldiers boasting of battles not yet fought. Slaves scurrying like shadows beneath the sandals of their masters. And lovers walking hand in hand, pretending eternity while fearing the moment's passing. Xenophon, walking beside him, watched the crowd and whispered, "Master, the city seems alive today." Socrates smiled faintly, his voice soft, almost as though he were speaking to himself. "Alive, yes, but awake, perhaps not. Do you not see, Xenophon, how many faces are worn and discarded here, like garments changing with the season? Look closely, and you will notice. The merchant wears the mask of honesty when bargaining, yet beneath it hides greed. The orator dons the mask of justice, but courts power in secret. The lover wears the mask of devotion, while his heart whispers elsewhere. This city is not made of men, but of masks." Glaucon frowned, puzzled. "But are masks not necessary, master? Must we not play our parts in life, as actors in a great play?" Socrates stopped beneath the shade of an olive tree, the rising sun gilding the wrinkles of his face. "Ah, Glaucon," he said, "a mask is not evil in itself, for life demands roles. A father must act as a father, a ruler as a ruler, a servant as a servant. The tragedy begins not in wearing the mask, but in forgetting it is a mask. When the actor believes he is the character, he becomes enslaved to his role. And when the city believes in its collective masks, it falls asleep in its own dream." The disciples exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that Socrates was guiding them toward dangerous waters. Crito spoke hesitantly, "And if we remove these masks, Master, what remains?" Socrates looked at him with a strange gentleness, as though the question carried both hope and sorrow. "What remains, Crito, is that which cannot be removed. The witness beneath the roles, the silent self that existed before the first name was spoken, before the first story was told. That which is neither father nor son, neither master nor slave, neither Greek nor barbarian. It is not a thing you can hold, nor a face you can see, but it is nearer to you than your breath." Glaucon shook his head, troubled. "But master, without roles, without names, without faces, who would we be? Would we not dissolve into nothing?" Socrates rested a hand upon Glaucon's shoulder. "On the contrary, my dear friend, it is only when the masks are seen through that the true self is revealed. To cling to roles is to live as a shadow. To see beyond them is to awaken as light." As they walked further into the agora, a crowd had gathered before a young sophist performing on a makeshift stage. His words rolled like thunder, dazzling with cleverness, and the crowd applauded each line as though truth itself had descended among them. Socrates stopped, watching silently until the sophist noticed his gaze and smirked. "Ah, the great Socrates," the young man called, his voice dripping with charm. "Come, enlighten us. Is it not true that life is but a play, and the wisest man is he who wears the finest mask?" The crowd murmured, eager for confrontation. Socrates stepped forward, his voice calm, unshaken. "Tell me, young sophist, if life is but a play, Do you not wish to meet the actor who performs it? Or are you content to applaud the mask, while the man beneath it remains unknown, even to himself? The sophist faltered, his practiced smile flickering. And what, Socrates, if there is no man beneath the mask? What if we are only what we pretend to be? Socrates gazed at him steadily, his eyes as quiet as a still sea. Then I pity you, for you have become the mask itself. You have traded eternity for applause, truth for illusion. You have forgotten the one thing that cannot be pretended, the silent presence behind every role you play. It is that presence which hears your words even now and wonders who speaks them. A hush fell over the crowd, as though a veil had been lifted and the weight of unseen things pressed upon their hearts. The sophist turned away, defeated not by argument, but by something deeper, something beyond words. They walked on in silence for a time, until Xenophon asked softly, "Master, how does one awaken from these illusions?" Socrates answered without turning his gaze from the street before him, by watching. Watching without judgment, without clinging, without fear. When you see the mask arise, simply notice it. When anger comes, watch the mask of anger. When pride comes, watch the mask of pride. When sorrow comes, watch the mask of sorrow. Do not fight them, do not flee them, simply see them. And in seeing, you will remember, I am not this. Glaucon stopped walking, struck by the simplicity of the words. So we are to become witnesses to our own lives? Yes, Socrates said softly. To witness is to awaken. The man who observes himself without confusion becomes free of himself. He no longer fights the world, for he sees that the world, too, wears its masks. He no longer clings to names, for he knows names are given, not born. He no longer fears death, for he knows that what he truly is cannot die. The disciples walked on, their steps slower now, as though each word had carved new paths within their minds. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows upon the white stone streets, and the city around them seemed to shift, not in form, but in meaning. What had moments ago been a marketplace of clamor now felt like a vast stage, where merchants, soldiers, poets, and lovers moved like actors repeating ancient lines. Socrates' voice rose once more, carried by the morning breeze. Remember this, my friends. The mask you wear is not the enemy. Forgetting that it is a mask that is the true bondage. The gods did not command you to abandon the world, but to awaken within it. To know yourself is not to flee the play, but to see it for what it is, a dream within a dream. Act your part well, but never mistake the actor for the mask. And as they turned the corner toward the quiet streets that led back to the academy, the disciples walked as though carrying a secret the city could not yet bear to hear. For somewhere within them, beneath names and faces and fleeting roles, they had glimpsed something unchanging, silent, eternal. And though they could not yet hold it, they knew they could never again forget it. Above Athens, the sky stretched endless in blue, and the olive trees whispered softly in the breeze, as though the gods themselves approved of the awakening that had begun. The river of time, on the illusion of past and future, and the eternal now. The afternoon sun bathed Athens in a golden haze, casting long shadows across the marble steps of the academy. The hum of the city was distant here, softened by the rustling of olive trees and the songs of cicadas. Socrates sat beneath the shade of a wide plane tree, his robe gathered loosely around him, his gaze resting upon the rippling surface of a small fountain nearby. Around him, His disciples gathered in silence, sensing that his mind wandered somewhere beyond sight. For a time, he spoke not a word. The only sound was the trickle of water flowing endlessly into the stone basin, never stopping, never resting. Finally, Socrates turned to his companions and said softly, "Look at the fountain before you. Do you see how the water flows? Always moving, never the same, yet always the same. This is the nature of time." And Glaucon leaned forward, following the play of light on the water's surface. "Master," he asked, "is time like this fountain then, forever flowing, without beginning or end?" Socrates smiled faintly, his voice low and deliberate. "No, Glaucon, the fountain is not time itself, but a mirror of our own minds. The water flows, yes, but who decided to call its passing time? The gods did not name the hours, men did. The sun does not know it rises and sets. Only we measure it and say, this was, this is, this will be. Time, as we know it, is not in the world, but in us." Crito frowned, puzzled. "But Master, surely the past is real. We remember it, and surely the future exists, for we plan and prepare for it." Socrates picked up a small pebble and dropped it into the fountain. Ripples spread outward, then vanished into stillness. "Tell me, Crito," he said, "where is the past right now? Where is the future? Can you point to them as you point to this pebble?" "No," Crito admitted softly. "I cannot." "Exactly," Socrates said, his voice firm yet gentle. "The past lives only as memory, the future only as imagination. Both are shadows cast upon the mind. We mistake these shadows for substance, and in doing so, we suffer. The man who clings to the past walks in chains, mourning ghosts that no longer live. The man who fears the future builds prisons from dreams, and in their grief and dread, both fail to see the only reality they ever truly touch this very moment." Xenophon, who had been silent, spoke then with quiet reverence. "Then are you saying, Master, that only the present exists?" Socrates turned his gaze to him, and in his eyes there was both mystery and clarity. "Not quite, Xenophon. Existence itself is timeless. What you call the present is not a slice of time between past and future, but the absence of time altogether. It is the still point around which all things move. Like the unmoving axis of a spinning wheel, it does not flow. It is eternal." The disciples shifted uneasily, as though standing on the edge of an abyss they could not yet comprehend. Socrates let the silence deepen, knowing that truth cannot be given, only glimpsed. Glaucon broke the hush, his voice trembling slightly. "But if what you say is true, Master, why do we feel time so strongly? Why do we age? Why do things change? Why do we lose what we love?" Socrates looked toward the horizon where the sun dipped lazily toward the sea. "Because, Glaucon, the body moves within the river, and the mind follows its current. Change is the song of the world, and we mistake the song for the singer. But there is something in you that does not change. When you were a child, you said, 'I am.' Now, as a man, you say, 'I am.' And when your hair turns white, you will still say, 'I am.' The words change around you, but that silent knowing remains untouched. That, Glaucon, is what is real. That is the eternal within you." Crito whispered, "And yet we suffer, Master. We cling to what passes, and we despair when it fades." Socrates nodded, his gaze steady, full of compassion. "Yes, Crito, suffering comes from forgetting, We believe ourselves to be the river, yet we are the sky above it. The clouds drift, the waters churn, but the sky remains unbroken. To awaken is to remember the sky within yourself. And Xenophon spoke again, his brow furrowed. If what you say is true, Master, then why do men live as though chained to time? Why do we pursue glory, wealth, power, and permanence, knowing all things pass? Socrates closed his eyes for a moment, listening to the sound of the fountain's endless flow. When he opened them, his voice carried the weight of something older than words. Because men seek eternity in the wrong places, they carve their names into stone, yet forget the stone itself will crumble. They build empires upon the sand, not knowing the tide belongs to no king. They cling to memory, yet memory fades. They dream of the future, yet the future dissolves before it arrives. All this, Xenophon, is the play of shadows upon the cave wall. The wise man does not chase the shadows. He turns and seeks the light. Glaucon asked softly, "And where is this light, Master?" Socrates looked into his eyes, and for a moment, it seemed the world itself held its breath. The light, Glaucon, is where you are, not where you were, not where you will be, but here, now, before thought arises, before memory grasps, before fear speaks. The eternal lives in this very breath. A deep silence settled upon the disciples, as though the wind itself had stilled to listen. The sound of the fountain grew louder, no longer background but revelation, each drop falling, vanishing, yet the flow unbroken, timeless. After a long pause, Crito spoke again, his voice trembling. "Master, if we are not our past, and we are not our future, then who are we?" Socrates smiled a soft, knowing smile, like dawn breaking within his face. "That, Crito, is the only question worth asking, and it is a question no answer can contain. To seek it is to begin the true journey. To live it is to end the search." The disciples sat in silence, their minds unmoored from the familiar shores of yesterday and tomorrow. The city beyond the academy still pulsed with its endless concerns, merchants bargaining, orators shouting, children playing, but here, beneath the shade of the plane tree, time seemed to dissolve. And in that stillness, each man felt, perhaps for the first time, the faint, ungraspable presence of eternity, not as a concept, but as a living truth, whispered silently within the heart. The fountain flowed, the cicadas sang, the sun moved, yet nothing moved at all. The deathless self, on the immortality of the soul and the awakening beyond death. Evening settled upon Athens like a breath held by the gods. The sky glowed with fading fire, and the last embers of sunlight danced upon the white marble steps of the academy. In the courtyard, beneath a spreading olive tree, Socrates sat cross-legged upon the smooth stone floor. Around him, his disciples gathered in a silent circle, Glaucon, Xenophon, Crito, Phaedo, their faces lit by the soft, trembling glow of an oil lamp. For a long time, Socrates said nothing. He seemed to listen, not to the voices of men, but to something deeper, the hush of the evening wind, the distant murmur of the city, the faint pulse of his own breath. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet, yet carrying the weight of eternity. "My friends," he began, "we have spoken of the river of time, of the masks we wear, of the war within ourselves. But tonight, we approach the deepest question of all, the one that lies beneath every fear, every desire, every hope. Tell me, What do you believe happens when this body falls silent and returns to the earth? The disciples shifted uneasily, glancing at one another, as though the weight of the question pressed against their chests. It was Phaedo who spoke first, his voice soft but steady. I do not know, Master. The poets say our souls cross the river Styx, guided by Hermes to the realm of Hades. But others say we vanish, dissolve like breath into the wind. Socrates smiled faintly, though his eyes remained solemn. Ah, Phaedo, men have sung many songs of death, yet few have listened to the silence beneath them. Let us see, not with stories, but with reason, if we can uncover the truth. He paused, letting his gaze drift upward toward the first stars flickering above the city. Consider this, he said. All things that change must arise from something unchanging. Day follows night, and night follows day. Yet light itself does not perish. It simply manifests in forms we name dawn and dusk. A flame may leap and vanish, yet fire itself is not destroyed. So too with life. We see bodies born and bodies die. Yet does life itself die? Or does it flow endlessly, taking form and dissolving like waves upon the sea? Glaucon frowned, struggling with the thought. But Master, he said, the body decays, the breath leaves it. Surely, when the flesh is gone, what remains? Socrates turned his gaze to him, and his voice softened. What leaves, Glaucon, is not life itself, but its garment. The body is the mask, the soul, the actor. When the play ends, the mask returns to dust, but the actor does not vanish. He steps behind the curtain, unseen, yet unbroken. Xenophon leaned forward, troubled, yet fascinated. Then you are saying, Master, that the soul cannot die? Socrates traced a circle in the dust with his finger, slow and deliberate. Can you imagine, Xenophon, your own absence? Try right now to picture what it would be like to not exist. Xenophon closed his eyes, straining, but after a long silence he shook his head. I cannot, Master. Whatever I imagine, I am still there to witness it. Exactly, Socrates said, his voice firm and clear. You cannot conceive your non-existence, because that which knows cannot be erased by that which it knows. Death can touch the body, but not the witness of the body. The sun may set, but the light remains unbroken beyond the horizon. Crito, ever restless, whispered, and yet, Master, if the soul is deathless, why do we fear death so greatly? Socrates turned to him, and in his gaze was neither reproach nor comfort, but a quiet compassion. Because, Crito, we have mistaken ourselves for what we are not. We cling to the body as though it were the self, and when we see it falter, we tremble. We cling to our names, our roles, our stories, and when they dissolve, we believe we dissolve with them. This is the root of fear, forgetting who we truly are. Phaedo spoke then, his voice low, almost reverent. Then, Master, to know ourselves is to know we are deathless. Socrates nodded slowly. Yes, Phaedo, to truly know oneself is to awaken beyond birth and death. But this knowing is not in words, nor in thought. It is not enough to believe you are eternal, you must see it. You must stand before the silence of your own being and witness that which neither begins nor ends. Glaucon's brow furrowed, his voice tight with longing. And how, Master, does one see this? How does one awaken? Socrates drew a deep breath, as though pulling his words from the well of something older than memory. First, he said, You must see what you are not. You are not the body, for it changes and withers, yet something within you remains the same. You are not the mind, for thoughts rise and fall like clouds, yet there is an awareness in you that sees them pass. You are not your name, for it was given to you. You are not your story, for it is told about you. What you are cannot be touched by birth or death, by gain or loss, by time or fate. You are that which witnesses all, yet is witnessed by none. Xenophon whispered, "The silent witness." Socrates nodded. Yes, the silent witness, that which watches the dance of life without ever stepping into it, that which is untouched by sorrow, unmoved by death, unbroken by time. Crito's voice trembled as he asked, "And if we awaken to this witness, Master, what changes?" Socrates looked at him steadily, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of mountains, everything and nothing. The world remains as it is. Bodies are born and die. Seasons turn. Empires rise and fall. Yet you no longer cling to shadows, no longer fight the river. You act, but you do not grasp. You love, but you do not bind. You live, yet you are free of life. And when death comes, you do not tremble, for you know it touches only the garment, not the one who wears it. A hush fell upon the courtyard. Beyond its walls, Athens still pulsed with its endless concerns. Merchants haggled, children laughed, soldiers drank, but here, beneath the olive tree, time seemed to have loosened its grip. The disciples sat in stillness, each tasting, faintly, the edges of a freedom they could not yet name. The oil lamp flickered in the evening breeze, its flame bowing and rising, yet never extinguished. Socrates lowered his gaze to the lamp and spoke softly, almost as if to himself. "See the flame, my friends. It dances, yet the fire itself does not move. The form changes, the essence remains. So it is with you." Phaedo closed his eyes, and for the first time, he felt not as a man within time, but as something vast, silent, and untouchable, like a shoreless sea, upon which his thoughts and fears were but ripples. Glaucon, too, sat unmoving, as though the weight of his striving had slipped away, leaving only the stillness beneath. And above them, the stars unveiled themselves one by one, ancient witnesses to the fleeting dreams of men. For a long while, no one spoke. There was no need. The great return, on reincarnation, the cycles of the soul, and liberation beyond time. The night deepened over Athens, and the courtyard lay wrapped in silence, save for the soft whisper of the olive leaves swaying above. The stars stretched endlessly, each one burning like an ancient memory etched into the fabric of the cosmos. Within this stillness, Socrates sat unmoving, his eyes half closed, as though listening to a music unheard by mortal ears. Around him, his disciples lingered, their breaths quiet, their hearts tethered between fear and wonder. At length, Socrates opened his eyes and spoke, his voice steady and unhurried, as though drawn from some depth beneath time itself. "My friends," he began, "tonight we walk where few dare tread. We have spoken of the deathless witness, the eternal essence that survives the fall of the body. But now we must ask, if the soul does not perish, where does it go? If death is but a doorway, what lies beyond the threshold?" Crito leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Master, do you mean to say there is another life after this one?" Socrates smiled faintly, his gaze shifting toward the night sky. "Not one life, Crito, but many. Just as the seasons turn, and spring follows winter without end. So too does the soul wander through many forms, seeking what it has forgotten. Glaucon frowned, his voice edged with doubt. But why, master? If the soul is deathless and perfect, why should it fall into so many births? Why return to flesh again and again? Socrates lifted a pebble from the ground and held it in his palm, letting the lamplight dance upon its surface. See this stone, Glaucon. It lies still, unmoving, yet the river shapes it endlessly. So it is with the soul. Though in its essence it is whole, untouched, and pure, when it descends into the realm of time, it forgets itself. It identifies with the body, with desire, with fear, and thus becomes bound. What is bound must wander until it remembers its freedom. Phaedo's voice trembled, half whispered. Then we are trapped, master, prisoners in a cycle without end. Socrates looked at him with the calmness of the deep sea. Not trapped, Phaedo, only dreaming, and every dream may be awakened from. A hush fell upon the circle, the oil lamp flickering in the quiet breeze. The disciples sat motionless, drawn into a silence deeper than words. At last, Socrates continued. Listen well, he said. The ancient spoke of 3 rivers upon which every soul must journey. The first is the river of birth, where memory is veiled and the soul takes a body, forgetting its true nature. The second is the river of desire, where men chase shadows, believing them to be real, binding themselves tighter with every longing. The third is the river of return, the great current that draws every soul, willingly or not, back to the source from which it came. He paused, letting the words sink into their hearts. To cross the first 2 rivers is to wander endlessly through forms. To cross the third is to awaken. That, my friends, is the great return. Glaucon's breath caught, his voice hushed. And how, master, does one awaken? How does one escape this endless wheel? Socrates turned his gaze toward him, and when he spoke, it was with the clarity of a man who has seen beyond sight. First, you must see the wheel itself. Most men live as though this life is all there is, clinging to its pleasures, fearing its losses. They believe themselves to be the body, and thus they bind themselves to bodies. But when one sees clearly, when one knows that the self is not the flesh, nor the name, nor the story, the chains begin to loosen. Crito asked softly, "And if we fail to awaken, master?" Socrates' expression was neither stern nor sorrowful, but filled with quiet understanding. Then, Crito, we return, again and again, into forms, into names, into worlds, until we have learned what must be learned, until we see what must be seen. The cosmos is patient, my friend. Eternity does not hurry. Xenophon spoke then, his voice taut with unease. But master, how can we know any of this is true? None of us remember past lives. None of us have seen beyond death. Socrates regarded him with a steady gaze. Do you remember, Xenophon, the moment you first entered this world? The first breath, the first cry? No, and yet you do not doubt you were born. So too with death and rebirth. Memory belongs to the body and the mind. The soul remembers differently. There are truths that cannot be carried in words, only awakened in silence. The wind stirred the olive branches above them, scattering a handful of leaves across the courtyard like fragments of forgotten time. Socrates watched them fall, and a faint smile touched his lips. Consider the seasons, he said softly. Winter buries the seed, Spring awakens it, summer ripens it, autumn gathers its fruit. And yet the seed is not lost. It carries within it the memory of the sun, though it lies sleeping beneath the earth. So it is with the soul. Phaedo's eyes glimmered in the lamplight. Then, Master, if we awaken fully, if we remember, do we return no more? Socrates' voice lowered, a quiet hush within the hush. When the soul knows itself as it truly is, unbound, unborn, undying, it no longer clings to forms, and forms no longer cling to it. The river carries it no further. The wheel turns, but the center remains still. Amosdenrum, Glaucon leaned forward, whispering, "And where does the soul go then?" Socrates' gaze lifted to the stars, his voice almost a prayer. "It does not go anywhere, Glaucon. It returns to where it has always been." For a long while, no one spoke. The silence between them deepened until it felt as though the entire cosmos listened with bated breath. Somewhere far off, a nightingale began to sing, its fragile voice threading through the dark like a silver thread. Finally, Socrates spoke again, his voice soft, as if carrying an ancient secret. "There is a freedom, my friends, beyond birth and death, a stillness untouched by time. It cannot be given, nor taken, nor explained. It must be seen directly, within. That is the great return." The disciples sat unmoving, each one lost in his own reflection, as though the very boundaries of their lives had grown thin. And above them, the night stretched vast and unbroken, the stars burning with a silence older than memory itself. The silent Logos, on the eternal order, the harmony of all things, and the final freedom. Dawn approached, and the first pale light touched the marble columns of the academy. The disciples had not slept. They sat beneath the olive tree, wrapped in silence, the weight of the night's teachings still heavy upon their hearts. Beyond the courtyard, Athens stirred faintly the distant cry of merchants, the rattle of carts, the whisper of life returning to its endless motion. Yet within these walls, time seemed suspended, as though the earth itself waited. Socrates stood upon the smooth stone floor, hands folded loosely behind his back, his gaze resting on the horizon where the sun's edge began to glow. He spoke without turning, his voice quiet but carrying a strange, unshakable power. "My friends," he began, "we have journeyed together through shadows and mirrors, through the masks of the self and the cycles of the soul. We have spoken of death, of rebirth, of the great return. But now we stand before the final question, the question behind all others." He turned to face them, and his eyes shone as though lit from within. "What is the order behind this world?" he asked. "What breath moves the stars? What hidden harmony binds all things together, stone and flame, river and sky, body and soul? And most of all, what is that in you which belongs to this order? And what is it in you that is free?" The disciples stirred uneasily, for this was no ordinary question. It was not about life or death, not about gods or men, but about the essence of existence itself. For a long time, none dared speak. Finally, Glaucon whispered, "Master, is it the gods who hold this order?" Socrates shook his head gently. "No, Glaucon, the gods themselves are part of it. They, too, are woven into the tapestry, bound by its law, as the leaves are bound to the wind. What we seek is older than the gods, deeper than thought, closer than breath." Phaedo leaned forward, his voice trembling. "Then what is it, Master? What lies at the root of all things? Socrates closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, as though drawing from a well beyond words. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, carrying a weight that seemed to dissolve the boundary between speech and silence. The ancients called it logos, he said. Not merely word, as men translate it now, but principle, order, song. It is that which gives form to chaos, that which moves, yet remains unmoved. It is the silent current beneath the river of becoming, the fire hidden in all forms, the breath that sustains the cosmos, though it never appears. Everything you see and all that you do not arises within it, dissolves into it, and yet never departs from it. The disciple sat in rapt stillness, as though his words touched something in them long forgotten. Crito spoke next, hesitant yet urgent. Master, if logos is everywhere, why do we not see it? Socrates opened his eyes and gazed steadily at him. Because you look outward, Crito. You chase shadows and mistake them for the sun. Logos is not seen with the eyes that seek form. It is known with the eye that sees itself. To behold it, you must turn within, beyond thought, beyond desire, beyond even the one who seeks. Xenophon frowned, struggling. But if it is beyond thought, how can we understand it? Socrates smiled faintly. You cannot understand it, Xenophon, any more than a wave can understand the ocean. You are not separate from it. To seek to know it is like the eye trying to see itself. When seeking ends, there it is, as it always has been. Phaedo whispered, almost to himself, the silent witness. Socrates nodded gently. Yes, Phaedo. The witness and logos are not two. The stillness you discovered last night, that awareness untouched by birth or death, that is its reflection in you. Logos is the vast sky. The silent witness is its mirror. For a moment, none spoke. Even the breeze seemed to still, as though the world itself leaned in to listen. Socrates continued, his voice calm but resolute. The greatest error, my friends, is to believe you are separate from the world, from one another, from the source itself. You are not a fragment torn from the whole. You are the whole, appearing for a time as a fragment, the ocean shaping itself into a wave. Forgetfulness creates the illusion of separation. Awakening dissolves it. Glaucon's breath caught. Then to awaken is to become one with logos. Socrates' eyes shone as he turned toward the rising sun. Not to become to remember you have never been anything else. Crito frowned deeply, troubled yet drawn in. But master, if we are already one with this logos, why strive at all? Why seek wisdom? Why live with virtue? Socrates turned to him, his expression serene yet sharp. Because until the illusion is broken, the dream binds you. You may be free in essence, but not in experience. Virtue, contemplation, self-knowledge, these are not duties imposed by gods or men. They are paths back to yourself, to what you have always been. Xenophon's voice quivered as he asked, and when one remembers, Master, what becomes of the soul? Socrates looked at him, and for a heartbeat, his gaze seemed to pierce beyond time. When one remembers, the soul no longer wanders. It no longer clings, no longer fears, no longer seeks. Birth and death, gain and loss, joy and sorrow, these remain within the play of forms. But they no longer bind the one who knows himself. He moves through the world as the wind moves through the trees present, yet untouched. The first rays of sunlight spilled into the courtyard, bathing the stone floor in pale gold. Socrates lifted his hand toward the light, letting it wash across his fingers, and spoke softly. Do you see, my friends? The sun does not strive to shine. It shines because it is its nature. So too with Logos, and so too with you, when you know yourself. A deep silence followed, but it was not empty. It was full, alive, luminous. It was as though the very air carried the weight of something vast and unspeakable. Finally, Socrates lowered his hand and looked at each of them in turn. There is nothing more to teach, he said simply, for the teacher was always within you. I can point to the door, but only you can step through. The disciples sat unmoving, their hearts quiet, their breath steady, as though some ancient knowing had stirred awake within them. And so they sat, as the sun climbed higher, its light spilling across the marble, across their faces, across the olive leaves whispering above. In that moment, there were no questions, no answers, no seekers, no sought. There was only the silent Logos. And in its silence, everything was complete.